All right, no.
Before we open our meeting, I want to acknowledge the passing of Queen Elizabeth II last week and the accession of King Charles III to the throne, and I'd like to acknowledge that with a moment's silence. Thank you. I also want to acknowledge that this is Te Raki o Te Reo Māori and Kia ora koutou. Nau mai haere mai. Welcome to this, the final meeting of the Cromwell Community Board for this term in office. And I challenge all of you to add some Te Reo Māori to the new people over this week to mark and to move forward with learning the language. We are going to start with a public forum, and I'd like to welcome Liz Carroll Lowe from the Terrace School to our meeting. Welcome, Liz, the floor is yours.
Kia ora, everyone. Seeing it's your final meeting, I'd just like to say thank you for your service to Cromwell, darling. So I'm a volunteer, use the term loosely, for Terrace School. I have a grandson who started there just over a year ago. In a former life, I was a fundraiser, event manager, volunteer coordinator or whatever. So I said, is there anything I could help with school? So naturally it was fundraising. Our pool is in extremely poor condition, and that is what our application is for. It needs to be completely re-fiberglassed inside and outside. The children use the pool every single day during summer. And it's also a community pool, so the community, you know, can have keys and come down and swim. Personally, I swim every single day in summer because I have arthritis issues and the pool is very warm, whereas the Cromwell one is actually a bit cold for me. So the pool is really valuable to the community. Unfortunately, what's happened is that about 5 years ago, whoever applied the fiberglass to the pool applied the wrong type of fiberglass, and it is peeling off badly to the point where last summer, on the last week of school, the children were having competitions to see who could pick the most fiberglass off the bottom of the pool. It's dangerous. The children were coming out with cut feet and scratches, as were some of the community. So unfortunately, unless we can get it re-fiberglassed, it will not be used this summer. It's in such poor condition. Sadly, it's deteriorated on two counts even more. One is that our pool cover that offered some element of protection was destroyed in one of the big winds that we had recently. So there is no cover on it now. It is openly exposed. The other thing is that I've actually been on this road for about 14 months, but trying to get any tradesmen to give me quotes up here is like trying to knit spaghetti. It was just 14 months and we were really struggling to get quotes. So I approached Cook Brothers Construction, who have a very strong voluntary arm. I asked them if they would do that on our behalf, and they had the first quote within 4 hours. So that is why we are now able to proceed with funding applications, but that is also why the pool has deteriorated so significantly to the point where we now cannot use it unless we get some funding. The school we are looking at doing some fundraising for ourselves, and we hope to invite the communities of Cromwell and Wanaka to join in. We're looking at having a big drive-in movie night on Field and Terrace. So we've got that coming up. So yeah, I mean, we're onto it, but it's a large amount of money. There's a lot of things need doing to bring it up to health and safety standards and to make sure it's usable for communities going forward. Communities growing hugely. We currently have 24 children at the school and we'll be up to 28 by the end of the year, and more families are indicating that they're joining us. The 17 lots just been subdivided up that way, so there's a lot of interest in Terrace. Our community is just growing hugely. So we really need that facility because it's another 20 minutes down here or 25 minutes, and for the rural people have already travelled half an hour to get to Terrace. So yeah. Any questions? I'm not sure how long I'm supposed to speak for. I could go for hours, but
So I can see from your projected budget that your fundraising committee intends to put in $20,000. Have you got, where are you sitting with that? Because the budget that you have, the audited accounts are the school accounts rather than the.
Correct.
School.
And this is where it becomes very tricky. So you've clearly identified so it's called FOTS, Friends of Terrace School, and that's like the old PTA for my age. And they fundraise to pay a teacher's salary and other resources. For instance, the children are having 5 weeks of skiing lessons, FOTS pay for that. So this fundraising that we're doing is separate from that. This is the school doing the pool.
Right, so that's
okay.
The school budget sitting there.
Correct, that's why it's different. So FOTS have some investment, which is dwindling majorly from the original Shrek books. So they have some long-term investment, and they have committed to giving the school 20,000 towards the pool. So our fundraising also has to be very mindful that FOTS are still fundraising as well, because if they don't get their money, we don't have a salary for a teacher. So that's why we're trying to be very careful.
28 kids, you're getting pretty close to that.
We are. We know. But they also resources and things that they fund for activities for the kids. So yeah, that's why it's 2 separate ones.
Cool. Anyone else got questions for this?
You're welcome to come out and have a look. And when it gets done, I say when it gets done, you can come for a swim.
I see a bit of timeline in there as well. It's quite a optimistic timeline.
It's a very optimistic timeline. If it took me 14 months to get quotes, how long is it going to take me to get tradesmen there?
Yeah. Thank you very much for your time. It's a very full application, which of course we will consider later in our meeting, but thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you.
Welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Righty ho. So that just takes me to our apologies, and I have an apology from our Chief Executive, Sarchia, who is unable to attend our meeting today. That need to put on. And the confirmation of our minutes, which are on page 7. I have a mover and a seconder for the minutes of our meeting held on the 2nd of August. Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Bob. All in favour?
Aye.
On to our declarations of interest. Just a reminder of the register that you're reminded to be vigilant and stand aside from decision making when a conflict arises between your role as a member and any private or other external interest that you may have. And then that takes us to our first item, which is 22.6.2 on page 16 of your agenda, which is the Cromwell Museum Accountability Report. And I welcome Rebecca and Jennifer. And we can expect it. Perhaps, yeah, and not. Welcome, Jennifer.
Kia ora. Thank you. Kia ora, everybody. So thank you for this opportunity to talk about the accountability report for the Cromwell Museum. We were expecting Peter, so we're not quite sure what's happened, but I'm sure between Jennifer and I we can cover the report. So the as you are aware, the Cromwell Community Board allocates has a service level agreement arrangement with the Cromwell Museum to operate the Cromwell Museum, and it was increased to $40,000 for that purpose, the grant that was allocated. Annually, the museum provides a report to the community board to give an overview of their activities and their finances for the year. And just on that, I would note that the museum's recently given me their 2022 accounts, but because I had this report on the agenda, I haven't emailed that out because I just didn't want to confuse them, but I will email that out so you have it in a more timely fashion, but it will then accompany the next accountability report also. I have been attending I've attended, I think, 2 of the Cromwell Museum meetings, but they've been virtual, but tonight is my first night in person. So I'm looking forward to it, popping along and meeting them face to face. And the only other thing I have to add is that the, 2 things, sorry. The MOU is due that we have with the museum is a bit dated, so we're having a look at that and making sure that it's fit for purpose for the museum. And we are currently working through that. And the last thing is that I think that they do a fabulous job, and it is a great asset for our community. So over to you.
Right. Well, thank you, Rebecca. So I have been thrown in the deep end. Friday can't make it, so I'll just make it very brief. I think a lot has changed since the annual report was prepared, both in the way that the museum is perceived and how it's going to operate in the next months and going forward into the future. And I really feel that the museum is going to undergo quite a major paradigm shift with the new project, and we are very committed to ensuring that we meet the expectations of the Cromwell Community Board and the CODC. And we really look forward to working on a closer level with the project advisory group and developing how the new museum is going to look and feel within the new event centre. So it's quite an interesting road ahead. So and we're really looking forward to it. So please, if you've got any questions.
So I have not been the best at being your liaison person over this year. It's just been a very challenging year for many people, and I know many of your meetings have been virtual, but the work that you do for our community is very much appreciated. The plug I'll give you at the moment is you need to get along there to see Te Whare Taonga o Hiwai Tiraki, which is the Goldfields School Children's Museum has relocated to the Cromwell Museum, and it's well worth a visit. Make sure you have your cell phones so that you can access the QR codes to see the stop at motion animations and the movies and the information that the kids have sitting behind their displays in there. So thank you to the museum for giving us that opportunity.
Thank you. I think I'm going to miss it when it's deinstalled.
Well, it'll stay there for as long until the next one replaces it, won't it?
They've got another exhibition coming, so we have to offer it out of there at some point.
Yeah, just one quick question, Madam Chair, if I may. In terms of your volunteers and you're luckily still got a good core.
Yes, we do. We've got about 30 volunteers, and pretty much all of them are very regular and committed and reliable volunteers. So we have a group of people working back of house, cataloguing our collection and uploading that to eHive, which is the software collection program. And that's for anyone to see globally, so anyone can access our collection. And yeah, we have a great team of front of house volunteers who are very knowledgeable about Cromwell and very engaging with them as well. So yeah, very, very fortunate.
And a question you may not answer, or you might answer carefully. In terms of the wider district strategy about museums going forward, any particular concerns coming from the Cromwell Museum about where that's going or not going?
No, I think that we're very open to working with the new project officer. I think it was just newly appointed, and she's been very helpful. We have regular meetings. So I think that the new sort of way of perceiving museums and the role in the community is going to really develop further. And I think we're going to see some pretty good changes happening in that field.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No, thank you. So that takes us back to page 16.
Thank you.
And the recommendation that the report be received. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Cheryl. All in favour? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next item is 22.6.3 on page 42, and it is the 2022-23 Community and Promotions Grants applications. Welcome, Ali, to join Rebecca and Keith at the table.
Kia ora koutou anō. Thank you again. So this is speaking to the first round of the Cromwell Community Board community and promotions grant applications for the 22-23 financial year. I've just got a couple of things before I hand over to Ellen, so she's got anything to add. First, apology from the representatives from the Bannockburn Hall Committee. You've got a fancy name. They are currently in Africa and so could not make it today. Yeah, and I said that I would pass those apologies on. And we have Russ here from the Cromwell Men's Shed, who felt that the application stood on its own but would be available to respond to any questions if should there be any. The community grants, we've been promoting them. We've just had a funding clinic last week. There's regular funding clinics for the other funders. So whilst that was after the closing date of this first round, it's to provide that knowledge in the community, plus there was advertising in all the local newspapers. We had the applications. If you funded them as requested, it would leave just under $20,000 for the second round, which would close the 19th of March next year for a decision in about May. I just wanted to note on the Men's Shed application, so they've recently updated their quote for the build of the building and have, as a result of that, have had to get some further advice about the land that the building is going to be built on. They've come back to council about that. Council has currently sought expert advice and is not anticipating any hindrance for that proceeding, but I'm going to suggest that we add a subject to the grant for that particular grant application, which is that it's become subject to the land being suitable for development, just to make sure that that ticks those boxes. And that's all I have to say about my applications, but happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thanks. So we've just had the one application for promotions grants in this round, and that is from the Cromwell District's Community Arts Council. You will see that it was titled Chamber Music. Unfortunately, I think Peter had gone to an old application and hadn't updated it. So it is actually for their Central Arts Exhibition, which they're planning to hold at Easter next year. They're needing some funds for their to cover the costs of venue hire. Historically, I believe they have used the hall, and so this year they're now moving that event into the Gate Conference Centre. So consequently, the costs have increased. This type of event is one that can't apply to many funders for grants. It is perceived to have a commercial element to it because artworks are for sale, but it's a very small community type of art exhibition. Our assessment is that whilst it won't actually necessarily attract visitors in its own right to the region, it does add value to those people that are in region for that Easter weekend. So it gives another reason to get out and explore.
And what's the reason for planning to move it to? Is it just because it's in town and they think they'd like to get more visitors to it? Rather than at the.
It was at the Memorial.
Oh, at the Memorial Hall.
Yeah.
We don't have one.
No.
No, fair enough. Yes, we still do, but you can't go in there. Sorry, I misunderstood what you said there. Anyone with questions for Rebecca?
Sorry, I did have one thing to add about the terrace. I happened to be in Terrace talking to some residents about a community plan for that area, and whilst they have popped in and visited the pool through the fence and can testify to the state that was explained in the public forum, it's certainly in need of a resurface and a handout, and the cover is still there but in bits. So yes.
Can they claim insurance on that?
Insurance.
Can they get insurance on that?
Cover.
I suspect that the excess would be prohibitive if it's anything like council's insurance.
Insurance fee excess is quite fine. Yeah.
It was held together with MIC Day.
The application's only for resurfacing, so the cover situations is not quite relevant.
Okay, any further questions?
Yes, Madam Chair, I've got a question about the Community Arts Council. With the figures that have been supplied, unless I'm misreading this, it looks as though they have what they call accumulated funds of 67,970. Am I correct in reading it that way?
Here with.
That's all.
I'm just
Sorry, I
wondering,
need to look at the other.
yeah, I'm just wondering why we're considering a grant if they don't have the funds.
I work out where that is.
It's on page 173 of the attachment.
I can't answer that for you. I actually,
I mean, I also noticed that there's a sum of $3,763 in there of unused donations, which I thought was a bit surprising as well.
I might have a go to explain the accumulated fund, because that includes not just, that's cash and other assets, which so they've got $17,000 in the bank. The other assets are non-current, which is property, plant and equipment, so that's 55 less there. So of the $17,000 in cash they owe, according to this, 5,515, which includes some unused donations. So with that, it is normal to assume that they've got some donations they haven't used, and they've got conditions they don't use it, it goes back. So it's been acquired for a second purpose. So the reality
You
is,
think that maybe that's part of what they're using for this next?
I have no idea.
We don't know, but.
doesn't matter. Then it's already been allocated for a project, which is not the project they've applied for here. So they've actually got, according to my calculations, maybe 12 grand in the bank. And I don't know what they've got planned for that. I suspect that might provide them with a fund to present against other losses they might have from this event, things they do.
We have, I have got two things if it's useful. One is a table in case you wanted to change figures and see what that might do. But the second is draft wording for a resolution, which Wayne may put up, Wayne or Julie will put up. If we could get rid of it in magic docs.
Is it different from what we've got in the?
Is it?
I don't think so. Usually when things go up there, it's because it's different from what we've got in our agenda, that's it.
The agenda. We don't like to be,
No.
assume that you're going to give the grant.
No,
So
nothing. But you've got the recommendations, it's the same
Yeah.
figures that you've got in our recommendations, yeah. Okay, people, you got it?
Yeah, it's just to do with the men's shed.
Yeah.
So I am correct, aren't I, that the 844,000 is for the building of the.
that's the whole bill.
So, okay.
Yeah, and you've got that, bit in there about being subject to the suitability of the land.
Yes.
Yeah. Everybody happy for me to, put that forward as it is? Anybody looking for any changes or thoughts about different amounts that I think should go through? We do have the funds to cover that, it still leaves us $20,000 for the thing, yeah, for the next.
and just under 15 for promotions.
And just under that, so that's. So. Recommendation that A, we receive the report and accept the level of significance. B, allocate 11,270 to the Bannockburn Community Centre Management Committee towards floor resurfacing, refurbishment of the bell tower. Allocate 5,000 to the Terrace School towards resurfacing the school pool. allocate $13,903.50 to the Cromwell Men's Shed Charitable Trust towards building security fencing. Subject to the land being suitable for development, allocates $1,520 to the Cromwell and District's Community Arts Council for venue hire for the annual arts exhibition. Do I have a mover and a seconder for those? Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Cheryl. All in favour? Carried. Thank you.
And just in closing, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the board for their service. And it's been a pleasure to work with you all and to wish those who are stepping down all the very best. And I look forward to working with the new board and whatever form that may take.
Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, and that takes us to item 22.6.4 on page 46 of your agenda. Draft Bannockburn Domain Reserve Management Plan 2022, and we had Loretta Bush has come to speak with us. Is Nikki presenting the report? I know he would just try and see if Loretta's here.
Oh, no, she's here.
Sorry, please come and join us at the table.
Okay.
So what, I just welcome Loretta. And welcome Nikki.
Thanks.
Nikki will guide you to.
Okay,
so this report is to consider permissions to the draft Bannockburn Reserve Management Plan, and the report says that there were 3 people who wanted to speak, but in the end we have one, Loretta. So within the report, I go through an overview of submissions as well as a drop-in session that we held as an additional form of consultation, just to give people a chance to come together and think about things, and to hear from them that way. And I have also outlined proposed changes to the draft plan. So I thought we could start with Loretta, and then if you want to have a closer look at the report, we can do that.
and yeah, okay, do I sit down? All I'm
Every
having,
couple.
yeah, no, the draft plan seemed all fine, but I just wanted to see, I can't, it was such a long time ago now that I wrote it. I'm not exactly sure what the thing was, but it seemed that you were going to look at putting more, having more camping ground sites in the domain. I think it just seemed like, why would you waste your money and time and effort trying to put, and I'm also wondering how I came up with what sort of amount of sites would be. Sort of had in my mind something like 3 or 4 sites. Well, what's the point of mucking around trying to put 3 or 4 sites into an existing space when you'll also have more parking problems, because that's already a problem at the moment. And you'll obviously, if you're going to put 3 or 4 camping sites in, it's going to affect the space that's already there for other people. They will have less of a site than they've already got. It seemed like a waste of time and effort to me. So that's why I said it, but the rest of it was all happy.
Okay. Is that all? You good? Okay. Thank
So
you.
do I get an answer?
Yeah.
Question?
No, we haven't specified putting any further campsites in the plan, so.
Where did I come up with that then? It must have been mentioned somewhere. I wonder if I made it up.
No, so the draft plan would discuss doing a campsite plan, which would determine whether or not more spaces could go or not, but there was certainly nothing that said we would be increasing the size of the
No,
campgrounds.
that's the thing. Okay, so I'm not making up. Instead, you're going to have a plan to look at changing
To look
that.
at it, yeah.
Well, I think that seems like a waste of money to me to really looking at it. So that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Thank you.
With my go.
Yeah, if you're happy, and
People got questions?
Yeah.
No?
And if I stay, will I hear anything more about it?
yeah, we'll have a discussion. Yeah. I'm happy to go to sit there. Yeah. So would you like to go through the report sort of itemized of what we've discussed changing, or what's your preferred way of looking at it? Because I'm happy to do that if you want to.
Don't look at what the changes are.
Yeah, okay. So as we were just sort of discussing here, part of the process after this is to look at doing a domain development plan. And so a lot of the comments that have come through the submissions, I've said, well, actually, this is more suitable for the domain development plan rather than for this plan, which is supposed to be a document to guide policy and decision making. And
there's budget set aside for it.
yes, that was already planned. So the campground came up in quite a few submissions, and people are generally supportive of the campground, but are also wanting to make sure that that open space remains as an open green space that's already there. There was some concern about dogs on the domain, and the plan doesn't currently specify the CODC dog policy or dog signage. So I've suggested that we make sure we mention the policy, and also that we can erect some signage on the domain just to help guide people around what's permitted and where dogs are and aren't permitted in the space. The sports field, as I said, so many of the submissions suggest other ways that that sports field area could be used. And so I think we should consider these when we make that domain development plan after this reserve management plan. There was a slight lack of detail around alcohol licenses. So the bowling club pointed out that it just didn't specify that they're allowed to have guests. As well, guests of members are allowed to come and buy beverages at the bowling club. So I've suggested we make that change. I said in the plan that the Bannockburn Reserve Management Committee lease the whole space, but they don't lease the space with the bowling club. So just some little changes to the wording around that to clarify that. And also to make sure that management is included in their name, which I had not done. So it was also asked that we discuss containers on the reserve. So I've suggested that we just put in a line to clarify that the placement of any container on the reserve is discouraged due to aesthetic appearance and clutter. And that I've also suggested that we look at negotiating with the committee, removing the sport area from their lease, because this would give us more flexibility on what we can do in that space as per the submissions from the community, which are quite interested in increasing the use of that green space. So if that space comes out of their lease and comes back to council, then we have a bit more flexibility around that. So that is something I have recommended. Just some clarification around temporary and commercial use. So I had said that these would come to council. The committee has requested that they go directly to them first, and that we liaise together over that, just to save some time bureaucratically, since they're the ones who are there on the ground in that space every day. There was a mention of a cricket wicket, which they don't have, so I've suggested we delete that and make some changes around the wording for parking. So just to clarify that within the campground, people are allowed to park overnight and long term, but residential parking is not permitted anywhere on the domain space. So it was unclear about whether or not people could park long term on the campground, and of course they can, because that's part of what the campground offers for campers. So those are the main changes that I have recommended. Nothing major, I don't think. Overall, the plan pretty much suggests business as usual, as for the way that things are currently operating. And yeah, I think just a few opportunities that could come out of this process, particularly with the domain development plan to follow. Yeah, I'm happy to have a discussion or answer any questions.
Discussion or questions for
the Chair, a question about a community grants process. Does the Bannockburn Committee put a set figure on that?
On that amount.
So I can answer. So that's part of the lease, not part of the management plan process. So they are working through that. I'll have something for that.
So that'll come back through that as part of the discussion of these things. Yes.
There's a discussion.
Yeah,
Yes.
I've got a question, if you don't mind. You mentioned, Nikki, that there was a possibility of removing the sports field part from the committee and reverting it to the council. If that happens, would that preclude casual camping, if you like, on the sports ground, or would that then have to come through the council for approval?
I would think it would have to come through the council for approval. What do you think, Woody?
So the reason for that is we've heard from through the submissions that really would like to use that space as open space rather than.
Rather than having camping, yeah.
And I guess the discussion on that is casual camping okay if it's not being used? So we need to work through that sort of. That committee.
I mean, I'm just reading this here and it says that in recent years there's been very little demand for it. And I would have thought that the demand is going to be in the high season, if you like, when tents and unpowered caravans or camper vans and so on would be using it. So surely if it's being used for that purpose, then there's not really any room for anybody to make use of it as a sports ground.
Right, and so I guess that's the argument, is that the community have said that they would like to be able to use it, not as a sports ground necessarily, but as an open space where they can go and recreate. And if there's campers there, then they're unable to do that, or they don't feel comfortable doing that. So if we took that part back to council and said, right, this is going to be protected open space, if you will, and casual camping is permitted on that space, it means that even in the busy season, that space will remain available for the community to use.
So is this?
That's the proposal that we've made in the report, yeah. Yeah.
Further questions?
Yeah, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering, make sure I got this right, the draft plan that we've got, which is appendix, there it is that complies with the changes that you written? It hasn't, so I didn't think so. I want to make sure I haven't missed something. I guess when I look at that, the way it describes the camping ground, it shows the domains for the two, the camping ground and the bowling club. And I'm just wondering, really, if it's right to say that's the camping ground in the reserve plan, because then that's all it is. Whether we just should show the area of the reserve and the policies then support what can happen within that, and then you draw the lines on afterwards as you do the leases, or if there's an existing lease or whatever, rather than pigeonhole it now, because the bowling club, for argument's sake, and perish of thought, I think Gordon's behind me, but we're looking at my back as I say this, they may get all too old or whatever, or stop playing. I can't see it ever happening, but if all of a sudden you've got this reserve management plan that has a bowling club now, but it goes and does something else and becomes a propellant club, then you have to change your reserve management plan. So I'm just wondering if we shouldn't, the plan should reflect the fact that it's the reserve, and then your policies support what can happen. And you can put a thing as at the date of this plan, it's got this in it, here and here. And we'll have a discussion probably about whether there's a sports field or not, part of it, with or without the camping ground. But just would be a better way of representing it, I think.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
So that it can't only ever be a bowling club, is that what you mean?
Well,
it is. Currently a bowling club, there's no intention to change it from a bowling club, but if the bowling club folds and somebody wants to do something different with it, they're not turned away because they're not a bowling club, is that?
We can choose to be really prescriptive, but then you become limiting, and then you've got to go back and try and change your plan if you've got something that doesn't fit within the policies.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense. It was just divided to reflect current leases.
Oh,
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, so we have
Makes sense what you did.
this is for the full one bit of land.
Yeah.
And these are the current leases in place there.
Yeah.
And then, okay.
And then your policies and everything you have to set up all the things that can happen anywhere on that bit of land.
Yeah.
And you might even shift the bowling club. Might say actually that's going to be better as the tennis court. We'll shift it to where those sort of things.
Yeah.
You just don't have some bureaucracy that gets in the road of making good decisions.
So Neil, are you saying that might even apply to the green in the middle there?
Well,
If we
yeah.
left open, the grid could change in the future, something.
Because the uses that take place that you do by way of lease or license then can be just, as long as they meet the policies and the different activities that the plan talks about, you haven't got yourself constrained. Because at the moment, look at this and figure plan 1 says here goes the domain features in the camping ground. It's everything but the bowling club.
Yep.
And I don't know you want to do that because, you know, you may not want to lease the tennis court or the sports field area to the
Yep.
camping ground.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. We can certainly make that change. Yeah.
And I guess just to pick that up, then to me, it's those sort of changes and then the recommended changes you've got, it would probably be good to see them redlined into the document.
Yeah,
So then actually we know what we're approving, because I'm not saying, you know, but sometimes not, you go to that level of detail, that other things actually stick out and you go, oh, I didn't realise it means that.
yeah. So the way that it works is if you're happy with what I've proposed, then I'll make those changes.
Yeah.
And I'll make that very clear, and that goes to council. So council then adopts the final plan, but I will certainly organize it in such a way that it's very clear to the council what has been changed.
And the board can decide which way it wants to see it, but I'd kind of like at the board level, like to see what it's going to look like when it goes to council. So, and it's not a criticism, but it would have been good if the draft actually had, here goes the updated recommended changes, just makes it easier. But that's just how I operate.
I didn't want to assume that you were going to agree with all of my recommendations, so that's why I've not done it that way.
Be positive.
So when you talk about proposed facilities and upgrades and improvements, it's mentioned in there that the playground will need to be updated, and that will come under the council play strategy.
Yes.
What about the tennis courts that are obviously coming to the point where they need a resurface or?
They'll form part of annual plan or long-term plan. The board for funding for that, because that's would be required.
Yeah.
These courts are, yeah.
And the open spaces strategy that we're also doing is looking at the wider picture of where tennis and bowling and all of those things are happening across the district. So once that's done, it will help elected members to look and see, and us as well. Well, where is everything happening? Do we need more? Where do we want that to be? And do some strategic thinking and investment that way.
Are you ready to go back to the recommendations, or are there further questions or comments people wish to make?
I'm just going to question for Neil, because I agree with your comments, Neil. How does that sit with the recommendations? Do we leave them like that, or did you think something needs to be added in?
In my world, I'd say bringing back the marked up document with those changes before it goes to council. That's how I'd do it. But I don't want to be the person that delays things, but I don't know if there's any rush. But
is there a rush?
Just
well, I mean, if we do that, so that would be the November 29th meeting then with the new board. That would be the timeline then. New board, new council.
Don't look at me.
It's just that this board has eye over that for a while, and so with the council, but
there's a risk either way, because we, as this board, we can say, well, we're happy and we know you've got it right, but then it's going to go to a new council as well. It may not have the same issue. So I guess it's 6 or 1.5 dozen the other, and on that basis, I don't think there's much point holding it back. I can live with it. I'm sure that they'll bring back what's been put in place. And just whoever comes back to the council and board should probably just make sure that nothing slips through the cracks. And it won't be that it's intentional, it'll be probably an unintentional type thing.
Do we need to outline the things that we've talked about here that we consider need to be added or included as changes?
Recommendation C probably does it, because it's suggested changes.
But I'm just asking if it needs to be more specifically spelled out, or if it's just you've got your notes and you know what you're going back with.
I mean, besides what I've discussed, the one major thing I've noted is to change the mapping to clearly outline what the whole area is versus the leases. So,
Just not sure how to put that into a recommendation, that's all.
No.
It'd be quite wordy, but. And you could just put recommends that the suggested amendments and changes to the draft plan and
including
those discussed about amending the maps, plans.
Yeah, that would type.
Any of that?
Yeah.
Around and all that too was all under council too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not under the camping ground. Council looking after it.
Council will have, yes, that's not, and that'll form part of the main strategy for the council.
Okay, so recommendation C, Wayne's done a draft for us.
Recommends that the suggested amendments and changes to the draft plan, including, I think I'm missing a word. Yeah, including those to amend the maps are approved by the board.
Yes, you do that.
Have you got a plan?
Yeah,
Of the camping ground, which is actually do?
Sorry, but
Clark's
what was your question?
I'd just like,
I'd like to plan.
we've got no lines of actually what is the reserve and what is the camping ground in this.
Yeah, that's, which is the issue that I've raised already.
Yeah.
And it's even been reinforced by the playground part,
Yeah.
saying, well, at the moment it's shown in the plan, so I just
Yeah.
reinforced why those changes need to make.
You've only got one around the bowling club, you've got nothing else.
Yeah, so the other changes we'll make up.
Yeah.
Because there could be a sporting component, bowls club, tennis court,
Yeah,
cricket oval,
but don't restrict yourself in the plan uses.
just have all those uses in
Have
it.
all those uses provided for and have policies for them, which are there. And then you'd write up your leases and whatever. And when you then finish up with your plan, you'll have camping grounds, sports field, playground, tennis courts, bowling club.
But that's what, Gordy, that's what you were saying, that's the next plan that can be made there.
No, I think we need to get that holistic sort of picture right. Leon, we know what you mean if words aren't exactly that, so we'll get that done. And the next plan is a level down. So that
Yep.
we
We will start showing this is how big the field is, this is how big the playground is.
Yeah. And it'll outline, you know, there's 48 campsites, I don't know what they're at.
Yeah.
Just show you where they are on the plan. You can see them on an aerial picture. That's what
Yeah.
level.
And I just didn't quite catch Wayne's last words about how.
Right, so recommendation C. Yours, Wayne?
Recommends that the suggested amendments and changes to the draft plan, comma, including those to amend the maps, comma, are approved by the board.
Yeah, okay. So recommendations A, B, C and D. You've heard C. A receives a report of an accepts level of significance. B resolves that the submissions be received. And D recommends to council adoption of the amended Bannockburn Domain Reserve Management Plan 2022.
Well, I've got another unrelated question to that before you put it. I'd forgotten about one of the submissions. Right, flick to there.
Yeah.
Sorry. There's a submission about car parking, not car parking, from the one from Mary Stewart about vehicle access, and the response was that it's a private entranceway. I'm confused because I'm looking going, access to the domain is off Domain Road, which is a legal road, so I'm not quite sure where the private driveway is. Have I missed something somewhere?
It's private to the domain, is that what you mean?
I don't know, but it must not be a council road. Perhaps it's private to the domain. Yeah.
And sort of, if the GIS is to be believed, then half of the access into the domain is actually within the legal road anyway. But I think the key thing that I'm going to take out of the submission, and I want to make sure this is how you picked it up, is that there's some access issues and some driver, including parking and those sort of issues, but they don't need to be addressed as part of the reserve management plan. They might need to be picked up as part of the roading network and other related activities.
Yeah, and there was another comment about access, which the roading team have said, oh yes, actually.
Yeah.
That's a good suggestion and we can improve that now. So it will just be carrying on those conversations and.
But the third was about when you said private, I thought I couldn't see anything private about it, it was all just legal road.
Probably should take this entrance way.
Yeah, cool, that's right, thank you. Sorry, Madam Chair, I'm happy.
You happy now?
Absolutely.
Move on. Super. Recommendations A, B, C and D. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Bob. All in favour? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Righty ho, and that then takes us to Item 22.6.5 on page 125 of your agenda, which is the Cromwell Memorial Animal Design Scope. And welcome to Darren and Gareth. Going to present this item for us. Darren's just trying to get in the room.
Sorry, we are trying to get in.
Welcome.
Hello.
Everyone.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hope you've all had a good day. This afternoon, we're here to do a bit of a follow-up from the 2nd of August meeting, where we had a meeting and discussed moving into the concept designs and moving from there, and obviously the funding applications and opportunities. So we're here today to present you with the concept designs for the Memorial Hall, and also just about high-level costs. And obviously from there, we also wanted to have a discussion about demolition eventually, because we did bring a paper to you guys in March, which was tabled, so we do get to a concept sign off and high-level costs. So I will introduce, I think most of you know, this is Chris Jack from Jazzmax, Jeff Sutherland, so I'll just hand over to Chris. Good.
Thanks, Aaron, and good to be back. Thank you. Slightly bigger audience today, and obviously sent this previous, but I thought I'd just talk briefly to summarize some of these key pages. I mean, the journey we've been on, the success of being in the PDAG, so there's no surprises here, but just good to reiterate some of those key moves that has brought us on this journey. In particular, having been through quite an intensive phase of briefing, investigation, and some scope analysis. We've been sort of doing a number of different scope studies and iterations on the site to test some of those scenarios, and so we've kind of landed on an outcome and a scheme to take forward. So really, I think one of the things, as we looked at some of the challenges that the site's presented, particularly some of those underground services, and really looking to optimise the footprint for the building itself. One of those kind of key moves out of that discussion has been really the relocation of the Memorial Garden. As we talked with the RSA and we're on this journey through this briefing phase, it's really looking to see some benefits that we can realise, not only for the garden, but the better integration with the new building. How do we actually start to reimagine the garden as a centrepiece as part of this new facility, this new Memorial Hall. So that's been a fundamental move. And then how we address some of the challenges that have been faced, particularly on large gatherings on Anzac Day in particular. The sort of numbers have been increasing, and how do we make it better on Anzac Day and utilise the facilities themselves to support the actual activity of the day. So looking for those improved connections and amenity. So as a result of that, the other big challenge as we worked through on site was the location of probably the biggest footprint for the building, and that's the auditorium. And as we've sort of taken the journey through the investigation phase, we've really looked at what is the right sizing of this auditorium. We've sort of arrived at that 400 seat that's in the tiered mode, but providing flexibility. So the tiered will be retractable. We can provide flat floor capability for a range of other activities, so larger banquets and gatherings, concerts, and really a facility that will have support amplified and amplified live and digital performance capability. So very for sort of flexibility in the types of activities. And as we went through that, it was looking at not only the conversations that we had with our key stakeholders and find time, but looking at the sort of the utilisation, the work that was done previous to this in the community engagement, and saying, well, what type of performance and activities really would unlock this facility, and that's balancing the community activities with the possibility for professional touring group performances and unlocking some of that economic opportunity, conferences, events of that nature. So that's really what this auditorium is looking to provide. And so what we've been doing is going back through the loop since we last met and working with those key stakeholder groups. We had a really good session with Fine Timing an entity through our theatre consultants on board just to really sort of develop the functionality of that particular facility. In particular, looking at those back of house, to make sure that it not only supports their aspirations, but really will attract professional touring groups to provide the type of facility that will really engage them and want them to be here. That's in the sort of, I guess, the southeastern corner of the site, and really that opens up the balance of the site to start to look at the connection to the museum and the balance of community facilities, so that the museum itself, and as we discussed, we're really looking at saying for now or to the future, so as a phasing opportunity, how might we sort of integrate this within the greater project. So it sort of bookends, I guess, the site, and has a relationship to the old town and the heritage precinct, and obviously becomes a key anchor, certainly in that sort of daytime economy, whereas some of the other activities might be geared towards the evening. So a strong opportunity to sort of anchor the project in its own way through its activation. And the discussion sort of came around as what other support facilities for that. So I guess the cafe, the cinema is a sort of theaterette, not only I guess just for for screening, but really the educational opportunity of those historical stories that can be told as part of that facility. And then through that, through that engagement process, through that briefing and looking at that utilisation, what other spaces make up this facility? Those kind of flexible spaces that serve a range of those community needs and functions, but again can work hand in hand with the auditorium to provide that opportunity to really leverage the asset further. Mid-sized conferences, a sort of particular space that's geared more towards, I guess, the sort of functions in the event space, but at a scale that's really not sitting in Cromwell at the moment. So the opportunity to sort of look for that that gap that exists. And then balance with there was a strong sense of some of the community groups geared towards the rehearsal and movement. So a sort of what we call in the large space or the movement studio is a unique opportunity that we're really looking to progress in the next phase of design to repurpose, the memorial hall sprung floor into that movement studio. So there's some really nice opportunities that we're really looking to push in this next phase to realise as repurposing of some good materials. And then obviously with that, all the sort of necessary functional spaces that will serve with that. But I guess the key one, and this really, the project, as identified through the master plan phase, is about an opportunity to really connect to the lake and to the landscape. So those spaces and the arrangement of those not only sort of address, I guess, the community face and back towards the town, but really unlock that connection through to the lake. We'll put some of the landscape responses we move forward.
And those placements also are responding to the greater site context. We've got residential houses on the other side of the road. Where is it appropriate to put the mass of the auditorium? So that move by bringing that auditorium back from the residential scale and having the single story museum and community buildings on that area also lessens the effect on the neighbouring properties on the other side of the road. So trying to be a good neighbour to all sites.
And how do we, through this, just, again, the master plan emphasises some of those improved connections, the sort of evolution of that wider precinct from Old Town up towards the lake, and obviously the evolution of the cycling pedestrian pathways, and how do we start to activate and connect some of those opportunities through this project. So, the ability to come up from the lake to the centre and have a face on that lakeside and the ability to sort of, spaces that open up into those as well. So there's sort of many fronts to the building. And so just as a broad sort of conceptual diagram of that that site concept, so you see the relocated gardens, and then to the south of that sort of the service access pushed to the corner, sort of coinciding with where TNC's access is. And that will be the sort of scene walk and the back of house facilities for the catering, catering and the like. But and looking at that wider precinct, so we still, as we move into the next phase, we're looking to, now that we understand the sort of right size nature of the building and the types of activities that have occurring there, we can start to work with the traffic planners and the planners to realise the kind of final numbers. What's the optimisation of parking and how does that fit the facility? It's a unique one because there'll be different peaks and uses of the building through the week and through the months. And so we've looked at opportunities for where we can seek improvements to, the sort of existing parking down towards the east, and how we might improve the pedestrian picture as well as getting more parking out of that space, and how we might look at butchers as an opportunity. And then where big events occur, whether there's value in leveraging the sort of boat parking down by the lake, but ensuring that we look at the connections back up to the facility. And we provide, out the front door, the sort of drop off, the accessibility and those the kind of loading zone requirements as we move through. So we're sort of, it's a zonal approach at the moment. As we get definition on the building, we understand the size, we can now move into the planning phase as we look towards resource consent. And so that sort of diagram, as we start to look at the plan, we see, effectively there's sort of three broad zones in the plan, the sort of performance or the auditorium aspect to the left there, the kind of community, the flexible rooms through the middle, and then the museum at the bookend. So the old towns to the right, the lakes to the bottom, and Malmore and the town centres out the page, if you like, in that respect. And then the foyer is a kind of glue, a common meeting space, the sort of, the place that people will arrive at. It's got a front to the lake, a front out to the terrace, and becomes, the ability to sort of close up and close down the facility as you start to utilise different aspects. So the ability that really we can sort of use the space in different ways, and if it's geared towards community meetings in the evenings during the week, you can actually securely shut down the facility and not have it fully open, and close off the museum and stuff. But the idea that it becomes an active kind of hub in the plane. So you can see the auditorium with the seats retracted, if you like. And as we work through, I think our starting point, and certainly working through with the stakeholders, and in terms of really tracking the performance, the auditorium is very much geared towards excellent kind of acoustic requirements, but in terms of its makeup around its the sort of theatre gantries, the ability to sort of swap in and swap out kit, those things that really make an attractive professional room. That's our starting point. There's certainly always dials for efficiencies and economies there, but I think what we've heard and we've seen is this wants to be a fit for purpose facility. And then I guess as we work through concept, what does that massing start to look like on site, and how might it start to address its place in the landscape? How might we start to have a dialogue around materials but I think this key one is this opening of the facility out towards the street and the memorial as a key anchor as we work to develop this up with the RSA, and not only in terms of the significance of how this might work on the exact day, but it's engagement every day. How does it become something, a place to be every other day of the week? And obviously to the north, opening to the sun, the opportunity to spill out there if through some of those spaces and those community spaces activated them. But then as well, another front to the lake. So the ability for, I guess what we call the XL or the event space to open out to the lake. The upper foyer of the auditorium, and connect to the views as well. And looking at those wider connections down to the cycling trail and the sort of evolution of that, those pedestrian connections is important. That's a quick sprint through. I was conscious I think we went a tight time frame today. But
Coming on pretty much.
I'm sure the costs across now, so we've got the high level costs to discuss as well now. So that's an idea of where we are.
Yeah, and so I've some of those in this, and you know, to degree it's probably the PAD and the CCB have seen this in this format in terms of how we've broken those high level costs down, which was probably some of the key elements, if you like. You know, the building, to be fair, out of the building construction cost, the museum's been split out. We noted, obviously, we were starting to look through some efficiencies in the way the museum as an integration. I think we've realised some of those efficiencies in terms of the overall GFA of the museum, because there's some shared spaces and things like the bathrooms, for instance, some of those, you know, back of house facilities, the entrance itself. So we're realising some of those efficiencies.
In the meeting rooms, the museum has a desire to have education a bit more prominent than it is now, to run workshops. So having that combined with the community meeting rooms means that it's two boxes rather than duplicating that with a standalone building.
We've addressed, as we did last time, just the kind of work of the external works, the memorial relocation and some of that building interface landscape within the designation boundary, and split out the sort of wider landscape work, which really reflects at the moment, those kind of parking improvements, the Bridges Drive opportunity. And at this stage, we've run some numbers on both those as we work through a planning list to say, do we need it all? Maybe not. We might sort of, depending on, again, once we run the numbers of uses, look for those efficiencies. But it's around just taking a balanced and optimisation approach to that. At the moment, that wider landscape does include a sort of line item for a potential transformer upgrade at the moment. There's kind of early feedback from the services that the current transformer might not be quite up to capacity for the new facility. So we're just making sure we're getting on with it.
Sounds like that network.
And then clearly at this, given the market we're in, and given where, you know, the sort of post-COVID, you know, with the construction, you know, escalation, making sure that we've got a good contingency and escalation as a line up for the balance of the project.
Can I, Chris, just confirm that the way you've laid those figures out, got no contingency percentage within the figures above all the contingency is in that
Correct.
6 million figure?
Correct. Yeah. That's design contingency, construction contingency, and the escalation. So, well, it's normally around 20%.
It's not in there. It's a separate line item. I also asked just a detail on the layout of the building where it's page 140 on where you've got the rooms nominated by the usage, the exhibition, cinema and so on. Is BOH at the end of the auditorium a typo? Is that actually?
Yeah.
Is that not kitchen?
Yeah, I think it's a more generalised use. So there's the performance back of house, which would be at the top of the page, and then I guess catering functionality back of house. So kitchen. Yeah.
It was kitchen in the previous iteration.
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
we've just used a more catch-all.
They've changed it to
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because there's also, there's refuge, rubbish storage and some kit there, so we had just sort of.
I think it might be handy to have the word kitchen.
In case you forget to put one in.
Back of the house, back of the front.
It's three back of the house.
We could call that staff and databasing.
We had this confused, back of the house is at the front of the building for the space.
It's always the way of how you present things. We don't want you to get stuck in, is the door exactly in that position? The door could move.
Yeah.
A meter, you know, so it's, we strip back a layer of detail to open it up for the conversation.
And where we were last time, the discussion around, you know, at the moment, and that's another dial at the moment that we can, as we move forward, it's got a reheat sort of finishing capability as well as service. That was designed as we move through, looking at the types of events and capability, but sort of located to service the auditorium, foyer, and Excel space.
Could you just shoot back to your numbers page, please? Is there another page missing? Because I've got two subtitles.
Oh, no.
No,
Sorry.
that's all right. Just
Totally. Yeah,
totally.
I'm not freaking you out.
no, just going. Only because I wrote it down. I think I'll get subtitle. Maybe.
That number's a big enough one there as it is.
You get an architect to report on numbers. It's always-
Oh, no. Just thought.
No, yeah,
Hope that's
that's
fine.
good.
Yeah.
That's top.
What's the client costs and insurances?
So,
Obviously, insurance is fees.
fees, consenting fees.
Design.
Insurances, yeah.
Any more questions, guys? So
Can you just take me through the 400 packs? How you actually got to that and how much flexibility is in that? If you're talking about budget balance and things like that.
I mean, we've also been on a journey around, right sizing that auditorium. I think when we last, we sort of reported a range, 400 to 450. I think how we got there, partly is the discussion with our research consultants in terms of the arts and theatre consultants and their experience with regional facilities. I think the benchmarking that we looked at, so looking at similar types of facilities, similar scales, similar populations, but importantly starting to understand, and also I guess the community utilisation, what sort of demand might sit there in terms of what might be missing, that's schools as well as fine time and how they might use that facility, but also just where would you go, and I guess importantly, where do you start to find that attraction for performance for professional groups? What do they see as a kind of minimum number to start seeing some appetite to turn up? And so, I think with all those on balance, that's the number we've arrived at.
And then other benchmarks, one was 330, missed out on bringing events. Some of the other baselines are 380. That is in the Kings and Queens one has 380, I think, check on that there, but some of them is 380 is sort of the minimum. So if we're looking at, we've already got that auditorium that fits 300. We know that Carterton a benchmark doesn't do very well at 330. We need to be above 380. 450 would be stretching it, and we did realise that price would be too far because it also flows on to the other back of house areas, the number of toilets, egress, and so on and so forth. So 400, and through the next iteration of how big are the seats, how big are the aisles, that number will get firmed up. But that's the
the balance of making the kind of audience performer relationship, how close you are to the performance, how good that experience is, and how a step change in terms of that next scale up of facility. But equally, delivering that value within the facility as well. And I think the sort of missing medium conference size facility, the 350s and above to 400, there's definitely a gap in Central Otago and Queenstown for that number.
And then on the other flip side of it that we were looking for, is this future-proofed enough as our population grows? And the evidence from Interim is that 400 suits a population up until it gets to around that 2025 plus. And that's when you get larger, but they don't actually get larger facilities until your Auckland Christchurch scales, you get multiples of the same similar facility. Otherwise, the whole scale of it grows and you're looking into auditorium, mezzanine type seating so that the proportions and sightlines aren't diminished from an optimal performance. So all of those costs to make the footprint bigger, costs to make the height bigger to fit in mezzanines, 400 is the optimum happy point of getting community working there and going to the facility so that it's not seeming too large for when it is, say, an intimate performance, but also not missing out on that commercial opportunity of travelling acts that would be going around Gore and Tapanui and
And alongside that, Susie, could you just talk to where you pitched the stage and the proscenium arch? Because there's a range of choices there and how sophisticated a stage area you have.
Yes. So the stage currently drawn is a metre higher than the balance of floor there. And that's also from speaking to the user groups and external stakeholders of who will be using the space from Polytech, from schools, from other conference type facilities, that having a raised stage is preferred rather than just a flat floor stage. And that is something that also sets it apart from the XL area that doesn't have a stage. When we're looking at how big the stage is and the dimensions of the proscenium arch, there is a little bit of to and fro that we'll be working out in the next step of sight lines, but the benchmarks have landed on this being this is the right size fit that suits the travelling acts. And if you make it 2 metres narrow on each side, you haven't got enough area for the health and safety of the back and house performances. You haven't got the right area to actually bring in the different drop-down screens. We've ruled out the fly tower as being a requirement because we don't have the technical skills. We don't, or sort of volunteer access. So Gore has a fly tower, but they also have someone there that volunteers their time a lot to the operation of that. We haven't needed it, and also a lot of performing acts these days have changed what they travel with, knowing that most regional theatres don't have those facilities. So again, it's going, what do we need for Cromwell? What do we need to bring commercial touring groups? And where is the happy middle ground of making sure that it's fit for purpose now and into the future?
Are you talking grids?
Grids, hanging curtains, set-down curtains, pulley systems.
Yes, and there are still, you can, these mini fly capabilities with certain systems. Certainly, we took a one time about sort of size and many, you know, the fly obviously to do a full scene, you need as much again, and obviously the significant cost that comes with it as well as complexity of flying scenes and other activities, but there's still the ability to do mini fly within a proscenium with certain types of kit. And again, looking at that within as we develop them.
Yeah, so that will be once you get further down the.
Yeah, we've got.
Yes, in terms of the detail of the heights and things like that.
Yeah, and then and getting into that section and work and understanding that. You know, and also at the moment there's items in there for the sort of turnkey of operation of auditorium in terms of all the lighting kit, grids and trusses, and then as we work through it, start work out all the types of performances and how to detail those up.
And that's also been taken into consideration. How many theatre shows do we have or could we have? And what are the other user groups when you've got sports and school and Polytech celebrations as well as industry celebrations that could use it? What is the changeover between different modes of operation? Because as soon as you go into, there's going to be a 2-day stand down for pack in, pack out, that actually affects how much you can use the facility. So whereas an operational easy ground sitting at, and from the advice we've had and also the sort of user group feedback on, we won't even come if it's a 2-day change around, if that's what we're recommending.
Can I ask a question? Is the auditorium, if it were, for example, I mean, can it be changed to a performance in view in the presence of maybe 200 people? Is there the facility to, to cut it down? I mean, you mentioned tiered seating, and that could be rolled out. But is there a facility to just have 200 seats in the auditorium, for example?
We haven't at this stage looked at screening off or partitioning the auditorium. I mean, it's the way that flowing is shaping up. There's quite an intimacy in the way that those seats will be arranged. Quite steep, quite forward. So the idea that I think our greatest sight distance is just about 15 metres, which is pretty good. They usually the limits are up to 20 and 25. So yeah. I think there'll be a sense that there's intimacy within the volume, and I think that's something we want to work through in this next phase to understand. Do we need to screen that down, or because we're getting this kind of intimacy through the steepness of the tier and the design of the space itself, where that kind of is derived from the way that the space feels. And certainly from, when I talk about that, that's not just physical space, but the acoustics and how well you feel connected to the performance itself. Notwithstanding that, I think the other way is that we are looking at, with that flexibility becomes different types of performance typologies. So a thrust performance or a sort of mini courtyard in the round is possible as we're looking at those typologies.
And that's also catering for school groups where you might only retract or extend the seating 3/4, say, and then there's room for loose chairs or kids sitting on the ground like what they do under kapahaka performances currently. So how can it really work for different settings? And the thrust performance that Chris said there is, if the seats only extended so far, you could then extend the stage into like a mini catwalk type arrangement so that you can. So those are all the reasons why we're saying retractable seating rather than a fixed seating rake, because this part of the building is also incredibly tuned for acoustics, that this is the zone where you would have that 600-800 dance concert. It would be overspeccing the other areas to have that same. Making this part of the building work really hard, like every other part of the building is working really hard. Well.
And it'd be fair to say, wouldn't it, that there's a considerable flexibility in what kind of style and shape and profile of tiered seating.
Correct. Yeah.
And you get what you pay for.
Yes.
So I started off, well, thinking that, tiered seating starts in the back and goes forward, but honestly, you can pay your money and takes your choice, and that gives a lot of flexibility, just what Jesse and Chris have been talking about.
The thing that I was probably a bit concerned about is that, if you had an auditorium that's capable of taking 400 people and there are only 200 in it.
Feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And lighting and the acoustics and all of.
Absolutely, and that is a consideration, and I think that's one of the things that we have talked about through this process is that flexibility of those spaces to do that. And we know that our community has told us that bigger is better, but you do also need to consider that depending on the type of performance, you may not have an audience of 400 people, or you may have an audience of 400 people, but that means your show is only on for one night rather than its usual 8 nights, because you had everybody in town who wanted to come to it there on the first night.
Or the last
one. The one in the middle, who knows which one it is. So in your plan also you talk about phasing. Can you just give everybody a little bit more understanding of what you mean by phasing of aspects of the building?
So the museum stock, it could be phased that it is built up to this line, and then the museum could be built later if funding and the board's decision is for that flavour. It is for that. There is obviously additional works and sort of technicalities difficulties that come with it, but that is still an option that is.
Yeah, and I think we, when we were looking at these various scenarios and scopes, looking how we might unlock this, it was very much something that has informed this concept. Is that's very much a live option still, and I think part of that consideration is as we evolve the services design, structural design, and I think I think visually if we found ourselves in a position to phase it, you just don't want the building to look like it's half finished. So we've been very conscious of you can almost imagine they're quite repetitive, those two forms that you still have. If you had an XL opening out to the sort of residual garden space, it actually would still feel like it's it's meant to be. So those are key considerations, and one we're very much live as we move forward.
Just to understand that better, have you got a concept plan with the square meterages assigned to the spaces?
Not here with me. So just broadly, so overall, we're sort of currently sitting at concepts 2950. I think the museum's
600.
circa 600. And the auditorium, I'm just going to probably get it wrong. But it was about, it was very much on where we were when we were sort of looking at that sort of right sizing phase.
Yeah.
We're pretty much delivering to that number. I get confused because it's sort of, we've broken it down between Stagehouse and auditorium. I think Stagehouse is about 120, 130, and it's through, so 4.
Yeah,
So
I was drawing the question. Yeah,
Yeah, the areas are very much aligned to
yeah.
the stage that we've afforded, and we have realised some efficiencies with having the museum combined from where the recommendation of it, what size the museum should be.
So the 600 on tail end there, that includes.
the sort of slightly greyed out.
Yeah.
Greyed out.
Yeah, so that's that whole area.
It looks less greyed out there, so I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that line there is a little bit.
Just, sorry, I might have missed the numbers, but that's added a total of 2950 square metres for the whole lot.
Okay, so scalability, because there may be some conversations that happen around affordability and obviously what we've got set aside in the long-term plan is going to need the boost of grant applications and community funds to come alongside of that. So if we find ourselves in a position where we have to look for scalability to enable us to get it across the line, what sorts of things would that change for us?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first exercise we discussed already is the phasing, I guess, because that just, I mean, you know, that's more around how you allocate costs over time. I think we've been through quite a rigorous, robust exercise to try and get this facility to deliver to where we feel like the community, you know, wants and needs, and I think that's been reasonably robust. As we develop the detail further, well, this next phase will really gear us into getting into those spaces, and you know, we'll be doing sort of room layouts and room data sheets on every single space and plan them out. You know, the kitchen will see all the sort of detail in terms of its planning. So we will always be seeking efficiencies as we work through those. The foyer is always one that you can start to flex, and I think the other one is, like we said, the foyer, for example, we don't. I think what we heard is we still want the foyer to be a place that services the intermission of people, you know, for the full facility. It could be a sort of gathering space and almost a bookable function space in its own. But you know, if we needed to scale that further to derive some efficiencies down to the effective sort of safe minimums, then there's always that dial there as well. And I think we would just start to report on what we're finding from each of those spaces and where the compromise to the original brief component in terms of you know, the function, flexibility, and some of those capacities we talked about, which were sort of derived from, you know, some of that analysis on the utilisation of benchmarking. That's it. To answer that quickly, the scalability also can relate to some of the, you know, the sort of development of the design, the material response, you know, the specification of those materials. So, and we can, you know, we'll always report back phase by phase through some value exercises where we might see some more value, but report on whether there might be compromise to things like durability, on, you know, life cycle costs, so that it's an informed decision, because we might save some capital, but it might cost you later. It's important to have a quick picture on those.
But it would be fair to say, though, that in terms of scalability, there's very little wriggle room in the auditorium, because once you decide on an auditorium of 400, then what flows the side of stage, back of house, and
the scalability is probably the volume at the moment, I would say. The height.
The height?
Yeah.
And that's what Chris said earlier with the functionality of having a walkable rig to adjust lighting, sound controls. Some theatres do that from the ground, where you bring in your scissor lift. So where are we pitching that for? And that's the next level of what do travelling commercial shows need? What does fine time need? What is again, health and safety sort of the whole facility comes into that, but that is something that will next stage will review and feedback.
Any other questions, guys?
I believe Neil has that.
Sorry.
I assume at some stage we're going to talk about the numbers. Is that a good time now? Yeah, I know, yeah. So Mike, I just had a good look. Would be good to have a refresher of just what we've got in long-term plans, where we are with each one. A number, much larger number than what we're thinking about, which is going to raise management. The board needs to consider about how we A, fund it, and B, the process by which we get that funding if we go down that path, and we do, how we get the approvals for that, the process we follow to long-term plans. Plans. Wasn't that bad,
Is that what?
Yeah.
So the consultation documentation had $16 million to build a memorial hall or event centre. It had $6 million for a museum, and it had $9.5 million for project management, landscaping and demolition, which gives you altogether $31.5 million to deliver a heritage precinct. That's what the consultation went for.
All down for the heritage precinct for the cultural
heritage precinct, $31 million when you put it all together.
Yeah.
So, and when you look at the figures, obviously Christmas produced there before contingency sets at 31.8.
So, thanks, Darren. Perhaps I could comment. So for the, as Darren has said, for the hall and the museum, it's 22 million. So that is what we have, and clearly what's in front of us is significantly more.
So the 9.5 doesn't relate to this.
No, it doesn't relate to this.
That's the important part.
Although I note that there is some landscape items in this that we can have some around. And if they are out, then we can take them out. But I just wanted to comment that we have had some conversations with funding agencies up to this point, and we have an early indication of what we might receive. So if the board is in agreement, we will progress those conversations and see where they land, and then come back to you with a proposal for either phasing or reducing scale, or requests for additional funding, or a combination of all of that. And if there are requests, if there is a request for additional funding, we will provide all the financial detail and any requirements for further community consultation. So basically what we're saying is there's a bit to go here, because we need to know what we might get from external funders, and we would come back with a report.
Okay, so my question around that is, thinking about the figures up there, in terms of going to external funders, putting the cart before the horse, or which way round is it important that we do that? So in terms of looking at this as a concept design and going, yeah, we like the look of this, we've got some numbers, we know that we've got up to this amount, but we're going to need some significant external funding to go along with that. Is it important that we get the concept plans progressing to that next step so that we can access that funding?
Can I answer? If you don't mind? Yeah. A lot of the concept, a lot of the external funding that we've spoken to have sort of said about it would be good to have a concept signed off and also a resource consent much more. So preliminary design, which is the next stage, pretty much gets us to that point, which means that it gives us the opportunity to be able to actually go, yes, this is the design where we're at, and these are the figures that we've got as well. So a lot of them need that step to be able to actually give us an idea and indication of how much they can see offer and fund it up.
And at that stage, that still can be scaled.
Yes.
So you've still got that ability to.
Yeah, I suppose I'm just wary of us locking ourselves into something that we ultimately then can't build, because that's not a position we want to put ourselves or our community in. We need to sort of be of a mind that, okay, we're progressing this so that we can have those really in-depth conversations with funding providers, talk about what other funding opportunities there might be within council activities or community board activities in Cromwell, as well as going, yeah, we're going down this pathway, but knowing that we've still got an opportunity to say, well, we're only going to get to this point. What are the cost savings that we can make as part of the build process or the design process that's going to get us there? That's my hesitation, and I'm sure I'm not alone around the table, but that's our hesitation, is we lock ourselves into something with that price tag on it, and then if we can't get our ducks in a row with funds, then we're going to be in a position where we've agreed to something that we can't deliver.
Absolutely fair point, which is why Chris and Jessie have been aware all along that we're trying to design what we believe is the optimal design for our community, and at any point can go back, so we aren't locked in, and it gives us that opportunity that Darren has said to have the more in-depth conversation and make applications.
Design, you know, it's great. It's getting it, you know, it's going in the direction in terms of what our community wants and what we envisage it being, and what it might, you know, starting to get to that point where you can see yourself walking up to the front door of it and going, yeah, we've built what we wanted to have for Cromwell. But I suppose it's just that wee snap of realism about can we actually get there?
The thing we'd probably say is that, and you just alluded to, is that this is probably where the community thinks we were going.
Yeah.
And the difference is now being and saying, well, actually, yes, it is. I think it is too. But actually, the number now associated with it is actually, and let's take the worst case, well, sorry, it's not the worst case scenario, but it's probably the most likely scenario, which is the contingency and everything. And it's probably going to be plus on top of that. And that's not a criticism of the work that's been done. I think that's just the reality of the world we're in today. So we're looking at basically 38 million, we've got 22. You know, there's $16 million. It's a huge number, and how that works out, we need to find out how we can do that. We've talked about that, and then ultimately we do say let's take this to the next stage, because I think that's pretty clear in my mind what the community have told us to do, what they expect us to do. Where that ultimately gets to, we'll make some decisions along the way to move to the next step. But it's really, I think we talked about this during the whole master plan process, and where we got to saying. Yeah, we don't know what it's going to cost, but we heard what you told us you wanted. We've now got what you wanted, we think.
And actually, I do, if I remember rightly, some of those meetings, the cost that was the pie in the sky cost, because there was no, you know, there wasn't a plan or a building attached to it, was higher than that. So somewhere between what we've managed to get in the long-term plan and what the authors of the master plan came up with are probably where we're going to land.
And just for context, although it's not to do with what we're talking about today in an immediate sense, as a board, the new community board is going to have to consider the costs and what the affordability and the scalability of this project alongside the regeneration of the town centre, because that's the long-term plan that's happening at the same time in parallel, and it's going to be subject to the same cost pressures that this project is. So that's a context that's going to have to inform the board when they come to the nitty-gritty on this.
And with the benefit, Nigel, I think too, is that while these costs have definitely gone up significantly, the income streams that we identified in the long-term plan have gone up as well in terms of the revenue we can expect to receive, because what we thought when land sales was going to be 10 million, whatever the number is, I don't know, is now probably closer to 20, who knows, you know, so the positive part is there's a corresponding revenue increase in terms of what we're going to realise, but all those numbers need to be crunched and worked through, assuming we
there'll be a balancing act between what debt we take on, knowing that we'll be able to retire that debt over time.
All we know is the debt what we thought we were going to take is going to be greater. Based on this.
And I had one other question, is just again, it'll impact on when the hard decisions get made. At what point do we get some kind of operational cost estimate, so that we know that if we build something of that size, what kind of annual operating costs and revenue, the revenue aspect to it, when do we get some kind of, when will the work be done on that?
Well, I think it's been done a little bit in parallel at the moment, but it's one we are wanting to accelerate through PD, because now we know, you know, we've got a better handle on, you know, what's the energy component of this building, what's the size of the building, how it's going to be utilised. So there's still there's an operational model discussion we have to sort of set some motion. but that's very much our preliminary design focus, is working with CFC.
I don't know if I've missed something. So we are obviously locked in that the museum is going there, is that right?
No, we can, the museum, because it's that feasible part of the building, once we get into that, we can still not, we can, the concept design you have there still works without a museum on it.
So that's a museum in the thing. Upgrade.
No.
And that's the key thing, is that at this current stage with what we've put in the LTP, the museum is being relocated from here to there. And until we make a change to that, and then all the stuff that goes with that, that's the working assumption, and that has to be. The pleasing thing is about the museum, if that number's close,
Yeah.
well, that's a bit of a bonus.
But that affects your operation, because having a museum there makes your heating system, all of those systems, and also just the operation.
But even if it's still going to be, it's actually there and thereabouts, which is a good thing to know. And I don't know that it says that right now we are faced with having to consider about not proceeding on the basis of the museums and the mix.
No.
Ultimately, that will come out. You're going to do the design one way or the other. You're probably going to factor into your detailed design the fact that if we scale this, the cost will be X with the museum and Y without a museum. And it's not going to be the difference in there, because it's going to be a whole lot of economies of scale you don't get, I guess. And that's important information that the board will need to know as it goes through.
I think another really big consideration, and we've talked about this a lot, with the museum included in the complex, then the building is open every day.
Yeah.
You've got because I think that was one of the things that the community had said to us, was that they wanted it to be a place that people go to, not just a hall that's locked all the time. And the museum being integrated into that space means that it's open every day, because our museum is currently open every day. So you've therefore got people in the space, it's activated every day.
And staff.
And staff there.
And that is a really direct impact on operating costs, obviously.
But also on operating income.
Oh, yeah, but it's income and cost.
Yeah.
What you don't want to do is create a white elephant where nobody goes.
No, so the museum there activates the building, certainly. And that's the same idea with a cafe and a cinema, they activate the building, so you've got, it's open much more frequently than it would be if it was purely a hall.
And it is fair to say that, because when we started down this path with museum, the new museum, we thought it was a separate building, and it's clear that you get really considerable savings by integrating a museum into the hall. And there might be discussions over the size of the museum, but and again, it impinges back to the town centre, because if you live in the town centre, does it get upgraded, and or if it shifts from there, you've got a building available now for other uses, so that it's not just a straight line cost saving.
And I think through the chair, comment about the white elephant is really valid, because you'll recall through those long-term plan submissions, people were requesting a much larger building. And that's why this is land where we think is the right scale that will have the most activation. It's not too big, it's not too small. It's, we're trying to pitch that at the right level, subject to funding, of course.
All right, where are we at, people, with this discussion, and are we coming back to look at recommendations?
We need to change that for a jet boat.
Pardon?
We need to change that for a jet boat.
You're not going to tell you.
Well, then we get into a discussion, where are you launching?
Okay, no, this is way too big.
Oh, yeah, they're going to have.
Not to mention the helicopter fan.
Is there a flat roof to put a helicopter pad? Sorry. Oh.
I was just going to say, I think where we've got to really here at the moment is we've got to decide whether we actually ask for this to move on to the next stage.
Yeah.
And the good thing is that we've got two possible escape routes, if you like, or two paths that we could take. One is to, source alternative funding, and the other is to scale back. And it may be we choose a combination of those two. But to do that, we've actually got to say, yes, okay, proceed.
Absolutely.
And that's what we've got to decide now.
Okay,
Madam Chair, just.
I know there is another,
Yeah. Before we.
recommendation there,
probably
yeah.
should just talk about that, can we?
Yeah.
And forgive me for standing, but I just need to do.
I understand that,
The recommendation, one of the recommendations we're going to talk about will be the demolition of the hall. And as Derek said, that's something that came about, and I think was left on the table from the previous meeting. And at that meeting, I certainly said that worst the effect, right, until the wife has approved the design and signed the contract for the new house, we don't want the old one down. My view's not changed, and those numbers make it even more clear to me is that I don't think there's a compelling reason from a geotechnical point of view at the moment. And I've gone back and looked at the reports we had done previously to knock the hall down. I know it's not being used. That's an unfortunate situation, but I think until we have worked out effectively that we are going to be support go detailed design, and we're facing a $16 million increase in expected costs, that hall doesn't get knocked down. And I think also tied into that is that one thing that's been portrayed and or seen as a positive is we're going to try and reuse certain parts of that old hall. Until you've got a detailed design, I would have thought it'd be unwise to knock it down, because the minute you might knock it down and might mean that you can't use bits that you want to use. I don't know what those bits are, but I'm looking at producers of the world and we've got you guys going.
We don't need to pay for storage.
that's all right.
Well, yeah, those sort of things, that's quite up at 16 minutes. I just, you know, I don't want to, not be trying to hold them up, or not be trying to protect the hall either, from not being knocked down, but I just think that the timing is wrong, there is no compelling need, and I'm sure the project team, unless they strongly disagree, they're going to tell me when the compelling need will be, and I don't think it's till after we've got a few more ducks in the road just yet, so.
Can I get maybe Darren and Gareth just to tell us where we've got to with that process? Because of course, the going in with a bulldozer or a wrecking ball is sort of like the last stage of that process, which is where you're talking about awarding the demolition tender. So what's happening at the moment towards that, or has been happening?
Yeah. Well, we haven't really gone too far into the demolition or salvage report yet. That's pretty much, once we've got past this concept design stage, that was where we will go in, we'll assess what's there. We've already got some really cool ideas about repurposing the floor and other things that are in there. But we haven't really gone any further down the rabbit hole with the demolition yet. That's why we thought, because it was tabled in March, we have to put it back in here because it was that. So it hasn't been that we've created a tender for it yet or anything. So it would be something where we need to create a tender. We would put it out on Gets for roughly about a month's time, and then we'd have to assess. So there's all them kind of things that do it. And I mean, is there any thoughts about when?
So salvage definitely is a big point of conversation. The more materials, from a sustainability point of view, the more materials we can utilise or repurpose, the better it's going to be for us. So we're definitely going to want to take our time doing that.
Yeah.
To make sure we capitalise on exactly what
And I think if there's some time to work with some local contractors, or just to talk a little bit about the feasibility of some of that repurposed floor, then we get more surety and beyond. I mean, I think the point about the geotechnical risk, I would say there's still residual risk.
Oh, yes, absolutely, but the residual risk is really
On balance.
355, it's not much. And Roy and Thompson told us that, the GeoSol guys told us that, the work that's been done.
The evidence around there suggests.
Yeah.
I know that, I'm only going to put my devil's fit hat on, which they say they don't know until they.
Of course, but that doesn't matter. There regardless, whether you find out now or later, they're still going to be there. And when you're looking at $30-something million, it's not going to be a big number in that big picture. Yeah. That's the reason we have to do that recommendation.
My thought is that what we just need to be clear of is, by not considering that recommendation, to leave that to lie again, we're not slowing things down. We're just taking a cautious approach to that demolition process while we get our ducks in a row with some other things. But things will still be happening. So the asbestos removal work has happened. That's completed.
That's complete.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah, there's definitely still a little window in there in terms of knowing if all going well, we're still, on a program with detailed design.
Yeah, but you've got plenty.
You've just given us figures saying you've put a tender out to demolish it.
No, we haven't put a tender out.
So how do you know your figures? You've got your figures there, but you've got a cost.
You've done a QS, the quantity surveyor's been through this and given us the market prices of what you've got for a square metre for a building that size.
To demolish it.
Yeah.
Yes. And that included the asbestos in that figure as well.
Yeah.
And we've already done the asbestos part of that, so.
Yeah, so if you are salvaging and you are thinking about getting somebody specifically to pull up the floor or whatever, then at least you've got a storage space for it until we get it some further down the track.
Yes.
And by us not resting out at this stage doesn't indicate anybody that we are thinking of keeping the hall.
No,
Just to make sure, because
no.
some might see that as being what we're thinking of doing, and it's not.
I make a suggestion and say progress with salvage options or investigate with salvage options what that looks like.
Yeah.
So
That gets
Are we-
on the box off it, out of the.
We're still leaving D to lie on the table, would be my thinking there, so it will be
So
another,
effectively, last meeting of the year, the live on the table now it's gone. So we'd have to bring a new report anyway.
Yeah.
For the demolishing of the hall. So if we can just do the recommendation that say we'll for the salvage aspects of the building.
take D out and
Yeah.
put in a different recommendation that says that we approve the delegation of authority to investigate, explore, which one?
I think you'll look at C and D, haven't you? Because
D.
C is approval,
Oh,
and then D is actually just saying delegate authority to the chief executive.
Right, so D I think is
Gone,
out at the moment,
Yeah.
so it's C that we're taking out and replacing.
I would say, yeah.
And we're replacing it with,
Further investigation into salvage reports and.
Proscenium.
on website.
further investigation to support the design. No, it is,
Could we take a couple of minutes?
could we take a couple of minutes, take a comfort break while we refresh our brains and find a resolution that we can fit in recommendations on.
Just thinking,
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Right, there's been really good discussion here. I certainly have a much clearer understanding of the direction we're going in and what the steps that are required for us to take next and where our resolutions fitted in with that. And so what we can, what we need to do to move us along and what we can leave to come back to. So the recommendations have been updated and Wayne is just putting them up for us there. First two are the same. A, that we receive the report and accept the level of significance. B, that we approve the concept design for Cromwell Memorial Hall Event Centre and approves the project to move into the design phase, which is the bit that these two up here really wanted to hear, so they know that they can actually get on with the work.
I think there's two of them.
Not working? Okay, so sorry, I can't put it on the big screen for you, but we're going to have to read them instead. Can you read them?
So A is receives the report.
Don't have
B approves the concept design. Oh yeah, that. C approves investigation of salvage and repurpose options for materials from within the Memorial Hall. And then the new D would be agrees to progress applications to funding agencies.
Right. We know that the approval of demolition needs to come back as a whole new report, and that will come probably to our next meeting after you've done some work on salvage it to the November meeting. Would that be when you'd be aiming to?
I think so.
Yeah. Cool.
I suggest we might also, sorry, I should have thought this, we might in the resolution note the costs because they're not in the report.
Yes.
And whether we should actually in the resolution note the breakdown of the costs.
Yes.
Because then it becomes a matter of public record.
As part of the report, doesn't it?
Well, no, I think it actually should be one of the, as a part of the resolution, we can resolve and we can note.
Yeah.
So we should note those costs, otherwise it doesn't come out in the record.
These costs are cited.
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry about the words now, just the board noted the costs as the project
Associated with the building of.
being provided. And that could probably be, dare I say, so you'd make that B and then everything else moves down one.
Hang on one moment.
How I do it.
All right, we just need to do some wordsmithing again.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you, Neil.
Well. I know, good, yeah. This may be the last time you get to be a pun.
Notes the costs.
Yes.
And
So A receives the report and accepts the level of significance. B notes the costs associated with the project presented at the meeting. C approves the concept design of the Cromwell Memorial Hall / Event Centre and approves the project to move into the design phase. New D.
Approves investigation of salvage and repurpose options for materials from within the Memorial Hall.
New E.
Agrees to progress applications to funding agencies.
Did you want?
B will have the numbers.
Yeah, B will have the numbers.
Yeah, after what Wayne said, the numbers go, and they'll total 37,891,202, is that right?
That's right.
There's a subtitle, yeah.
One of those 40.
We were going.
Yeah. Okay, do I have a mover and a seconder? Yes, thank you, Cheryl and Bob. All in favour? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Darren. What were you expecting?
Just leave them there for the entry make table aware.
That takes us to item 22.6.6, proposal to extend the lease held by Otago Metal Industries Limited over lot for GP 526140. And Linda.
Hi.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. So the purpose of today's report is to consider renewing the lease, which is now held by Otago, by Phoenix Metal Recyclers New Zealand Limited. So as you will have read, Otago Metal Industries were granted a 12-year lease over part of the endowment land off between Cemetery Road and Bannockburn Road for, I say that in 2012 for 12 years, or anyway, 2012 for 12 years. Just recently that lease, the business was sold and the lease was reassigned from Otago Metal Industries to Phoenix Metal Recyclers New Zealand Limited. New Zealand, Phoenix Recyclers New Zealand are a, I would like to say perhaps might be viewed as a industry sort of standard setting and leading the way in new processes for recycling and car crushing, battery dealing with and that type of thing. The company Poitu and Varakia net carbon zero certified, and to bring that to this district, they intend to concrete the processing areas at the current site and modernise every aspect of the operation of the business. So there's some benefits for council in that the area of the lease may well have some possible contamination. We do not have any proof, we have not undertaken any testing, but you would surmise that the activity that is taken there may be some that's the one, contamination, thank you. That there may be some contamination at the site. You will all know the area is noted as being future proposed industrial development, and this company would like to extend their lease or to actually take up a new lease for a period of 2 years and with a renewal of 2 years. That would give us a 5-year period within which to understand where our development of that area is going. And we would like to recommend that the Phoenix Metal Recyclers New Zealand granted or wants an intent saying it the first right of refusal to buy their site, and that their site might form a lot 1 in the development, and then if the plan change goes through and that becomes industrial land, it will have quite a significant value. And we surmise at today's types of values, it would be somewhere between $4 and $5 million. So that would also be an additional benefit in that it may well be good money to help fund through the next parts of the development if you know that that is a guaranteed sale, and then we know that that site is then also being modernised, that council wouldn't then have to worry about if it is a contaminated site. And I did ask the new company if they thought that they would be in a position to purchase the land at that value, and we have discussed those values and they are aware of that, and they have absolutely no doubt that their intention is to purchase the property and that they can afford to do so. So recommendation on that basis that we are asking you to consider today is that on expiry of the current lease, that Phoenix Metal Recyclers be granted a new short-term lease over the current area of 9,552 square metres on the following terms and conditions: that it commences on expiry of the old lease, so that would be on 01 July 24, sorry, for 2 years with 1 right of renewal of 2 years at market rental, which if it is rezoned, we would expect that rent to reflect the industrial zoning of it. And I don't know when the hope is that if that plan goes through, that it would be.
Indication is sort of towards the end of the year, but you still have a discussion with Kutai.
Right. So noted in the report was that a renewal was just underway, and we had hoped that the rent may have gone up, possibly because of that development that's coming, but it has remained at a similar figure to what it was previously, so it didn't break the $20,000 mark, and I just can't think the exact figure in my head, sorry, I think it was 19,000. But The benefit is that they may be a very good anchor tenant should they decide not to purchase land, or should we decide perhaps to retain it and maybe keep them as a tenant. But it would be quite conducive to the activity that's been taking place on the site, to have them modify it, etc. So have them modernise it. So if plan change 18 is approved, consideration will be given to including the lease area of 9,552 square metres as a separate lot in the development to enable the land to either A, be offered to the lessee, or to be retained as an ongoing investment, and a new lease being granted on terms and conditions to be determined at that time. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Mayor.
Linda, does the present lease have any remediation clause in it? And if it hasn't, will the proposed 2-year lease to the new owners have a remediation?
So the current one doesn't, and during my time I have found a couple of things where I've noted that we possibly overlooked, including that, and I would certainly be promoting that there was a remediation required if they were going to be vacating the site. And that would need to be in the new lease, because the old lease was quite short and it was quite basic. Really, as far as that goes, and maybe we didn't perhaps give consideration to what crushing of cars and the recycling of batteries or those types of things might have on the land.
I'd imagine though that there'd be a general clause in there that says you can't make the land worse than what it was. So while there's not a specific clause, I would be surprised if the lease didn't say that you should manage the land in a husband-like manner or whatever it is, given it's rural land, which explains the value side of things. I've just worked it out.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm pretty sure, even though there's not a specific clause,
yes.
So I'm with Nigel saying if there's no specific clause and if we adopt this, then it needs to be in the new lease and you're onto that.
Definitely.
But I would imagine there's probably a catch-all that's there now. It might be a bit harder to do it.
Yes.
But I'd say they're in the gun. If they've contaminated the land,
yes.
In fact, the chances are they haven't. The original lessee probably did. This is like common sense.
So the whole thing about the zero environment, and that Mrs. Phoenix Metal Recyclers is an urban landscape designer, and she brings a wealth of knowledge in that whole. I think she was probably the person who was integral to getting that what's it called, the net zero carbon rating, and that is how they intend to run the whole of their operation, and they are a very large operation throughout the country.
I'd imagine that they're going to need to look at probably a bigger lease area, because at the moment, if you go there now, you'll find that all that vacant land that's technically in the block, the worm farm, has got whole wrecks of trucks and lots of other crap on it. That is part of their operation, and I don't know that their lease area gives them a license over that. They're probably just using, and I don't know if the worm farm lease includes all of that, but in the area, but at the moment, they just store a lot of stuff outside because the yard's not really big enough inside to deal with it.
As in on the worm farm lease area?
Between the worm farm and Cemetery Road, yeah. If you go there now, you'll just find there's old land wrecks.
Well, there's council chips, there's containers, there's everything on the front of it.
Right.
But also on the Cromwell, there is a 4 metre strip, which used to be beside my yard, which I'm pretty sure there's something goes up through there, but.
Oh, yes, as in yes, because it leaves a wee strip between the leased area and that boundary.
Something that's worth looking at.
Yes, so there could be, that would be something they would look at planning stage, because they would have to check the title to see if anybody had any rights over land or otherwise.
I know it was used anyway because they didn't care, but.
Yeah.
I doubt that there'd be an easement.
No,
it's our land, isn't it? We've already got, so we've got access.
I remember when we had our yard, because I had my yard right next door there, and I'm pretty sure there was a 4 metre or 6 metre strip there. That was something.
I might take a look at that next time I'm out and about.
Jill, you look like you had something.
I was just confused. I was looking at where it's, that we're talking about the background, and then it says the lease which commenced on 01 June 2021 was granted for one term of 12 years.
And I think that's a typo. Well,
That's a typo.
Chocolate fish.
I actually saw another one for you guys to find it. It's actually a little, I think it's a word missing, I can add where it is.
okay, so it's 2012.
Oh, it's 12. It's 2012. It was granted for 12 years, so it expires in 2024. And then we proposed to agree to the early review, right, to give them a full and frank understanding of who they are. And with that, on that proviso that we will probably intend to dispose of them as law.
Yes, they're going to go down with their neighbours. The wind farm.
So I would suggest that I have had a great many dealings with the worm farm, and I would be so bold as to say that the worm farm site would also have a value of $4 to $5 million, and I would suggest that the lessee may not have an appetite to purchase the land. Whereas this is quite different. And can I also say that I did actually try to relocate the worm farm, that I identified an alternate location for them, and
Is that over the fence in the beetle reserve?
No, I had an even better site than that. So, and it would have been a site that they could have stayed on for probably any length of time, but it was refused quite loudly.
Okay, this is not about the work farm,
but there is quite a indeed people are.
And from what you've said about the firm taking the, that's a really welcome addition to Cromwell and to the fitting within the council's sustainability strategy.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
And I'm very fairly angling to say we want to make sure that the market we bought will support the operation. And I'm sure they might have a feeling of the sort of money they're going to be looking at paying for it all, and they're going to try to give themselves effectively 4 years to prove a business case to justify the spending of $4 million. Yeah.
They do intend to start.
Obviously 6 by the time they buy.
Yeah, they do intend to start concreting those, and that's why this was the main thing. They were really keen to concrete those processing areas and recapturing contaminants or other rubbish.
Okay, so I think we're at the point where we need to go to the recommendations on page 143 of your agenda. I think Linda's gone through them really carefully for us to give us a good understanding of what the options there are, so that A receives the report and accepts the level of significance, B agrees, and the things that we're agreeing to are very clearly listed, and Linda did go through them all there about what might happen on the expiry of the current lease, with Phoenix Metal Recyclers being offered some leases, and then if plan change to 18 goes through, what that looks like in terms of a lease or purchase of that piece of land, and C, authorise the chief executive to all that's necessary to give effect to the resolution. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Verna. All in favour? Thanks.
Lovely.
Thank you, Linda. Welcome. Takes us to 22.6.7, which is on page 151, which is the Cromwell Interim Financial Report for the period ending on 30th of June 2021. Welcome, Graham.
Thank you very much. So today I'm presenting the interim financial report as at 30th 2022. Just to note that this is unaudited and is subject to change depending on audit requirements. So for the 12 months ending 30th June, there was a favourable variance of 1.051 million against the revised budget. This is mainly due to a high favourable revenue variance, which is mainly due to the land sale revenue at Cemetery Road. We also continue with our unfavourable variance in our interest revenue as market rates continue to be low. However, the trend is now starting to rise, but unfortunately didn't affect our financials in the last financial year. So expenditure has a small unfavourable variance of 3,000. This is mainly due to underspends in operational expenses, which is offset by an unfavourable variance in the cost of land of 677,000. This is mainly just due to the Cemetery Road subdivision
but the costs are offset by the revenue above. And then we move to the capital expenditure, which has a favourable variance of 4.6 million. As you probably already discussed today, the main drivers for this are the Cromwell Town Centre upgrade and the Cromwell Memorial Hall, which those projects will all be carrying forward into this current financial year. And that's it from finance. Any questions?
Tried to find the hard one, but I couldn't find it.
Really, you've not got questions on the financial report? I believe that now.
You just had surgery.
Yeah, sitting still where I am.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Reports are written in such a way that they are easy to read and easy to understand. So that's, just why Neil doesn't have any questions, because it was accurate and efficient reporting.
Exactly what I said.
So the recommendation is that we receive the report. Who would like to?
I'll move that.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks, Bob. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you. You.
Right. Tēnā koutou e hoa mahi, tēnā koe rangatira wahi ana. Since we last met, I've been kept busy with various goings on, including attending with my Mokopuna and opening actually for that time Ahiwa i Raki at Golford School, which was an excellent event. It genuinely blew me away. Great storytelling, great use of technology. It was absolutely excellent. And I'm not just saying that because Anna's in the room. I really recommend people to go and have a look at it now. It's at the Cromwell Museum, and it occurred to me with some embarrassment as I looked at the maps of the Pacific that I'd be able to name more American states by their geography than I would Pacific Islands. So I just went, wow. But I think the kids at Goldfields would have it all under control.
All under control.
Yeah, they really knew. I learned a lot, and did I expect to learn a lot? Probably not, but I did. I didn't know. So that was great. Thank you. Attended 2 Cromwell business breakfast meetings. They're always enjoyable events, and it always amazes me every time you go. There's 2 or 3 people that have moved to the area, started up a business, doing something new. It's just excellent. I've attended a number of ministerial responsible camping working group meetings, including one today. We're preparing for submissions on the self-contained motor vehicles bill. That's at the select committee now. Submissions closed 13 October. Key points under the bill is that we will finally get a legislated and enforceable set of regulations as to what are and aren't self-contained vehicles. And also, if passed in current form, there'll be a new national rule that if on council land, you must be in a self-contained vehicle unless council deems a place suitable for non-self-contained. So that's kind of a reverse of where we're at the moment. I anticipate that we're going to need a bylaw to clarify our position on this. In addition, and importantly for Cromwell, when it comes to Lynn's land, freedom camping will not be permitted on Lynn's land except in accordance with the freedom camping notice specifically made. I'm not sure what Lynn's intentions or the Minister, what's he called, the Commissioner of Crown's Land's intentions are in relation to the Lake Dunstan sites, but we've got to keep an eye on this because if those sites are closed, and I know a lot of people look at Bendigo and hate it, but if you haven't got those people at Bendigo, where are they going to be? So we've just got to keep a good eye on it. I don't think this is going to be resolved this year, and I'm a bit nervous for what the summer might be like. And obviously this is the last meeting of this board. I have to head away shortly to another appointment, so I won't be able to join you afterwards, but I want to take this opportunity to thank retiring members Werner and Buck for your hard work and dedication over the last 6 and 3 years respectively, to thank Anna for magnificent chairing, and to thank all the members for the hard mahi that's been put in over this training. And I look forward to seeing those that are already coming back without any dramas coming back, and I can't say anything else about the rest. I know how I feel. So, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and I wouldn't always say that.
Renee, second of the Tim's report. Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, Werner. All in favour? Thank you for your kind words, Tim, not only about the fabulous work that those children had done, but also about the work of this board over the last 3 years. And so for my report, rather than telling you what I've been up to, I'm just going to take a moment to thank each and every one of you who sits around this table for the debate, the discussion, the laughs, the varying and varied views, and the sometimes heated feelings around the table. I think that we have been a very effective board over the last term. I think that we've got some things progressed and on their way, and I think that we haven't always agreed on every single item. There's a lot of things lie on the table, so we can have some more information, but I think on the whole we've worked really effectively together. I'd like to take this moment to thank Tony and Verna for their service to the Cromwell community. I've enjoyed working alongside of you, Verna over the last 6 years and Buck over the last 3. It's always been a pleasure to have you around the table, and it's great that we come with different connections to the community and different opinions, because that's what our democracy is about. It's about making those decisions, coming to a decision, but not always coming from the same perspectives, but getting there for our community. So thank you both very much for your commitment to this community. Congratulations to Bob, who will be joining me around this table again next term, and to Tim, who we will also see, and to those of you campaigning, I wish you well. And on how the results go, we'll see you back here for our first meeting in October. So thank you so much. Second, thanks, Jen. Verna. Oh no, I did. I moved. I moved it. And Verna seconded it.
Aye.
Thank you, Tim. What a shame you're not coming to them.
It's just life.
Only you don't have to pay.
Okay. Members' reports. Where will we start? Who would like to go first? So it looks like you.
This way. I mean, I'll probably do something similar. There's a pile of stuff, but I did probably the most enjoyable one was the murder bike committee, which was the little production put on at the Blackburn Hall, which was pretty interesting. Sort of summed up our committee life, being out every night and all that sort of stuff. You don't often get a lot of thanks for it, but at a time like this is when you can say thank you to everyone. So look, thank you from my perspective. It's been 6 years. I had to learn from, we were newbies together, weren't we? Yeah. So I had to learn from the beginning. So thank you. Thanks for everyone's input. I mean, it takes a lot of time. Neil, Nigel, you guys were, the OGs that I had to learn from. So, and I know it takes a bit of effort from you guys. So thanks. I appreciate it. I certainly learned a lot about how our community is stitched together, not just the council policies or the council finances. There was more to it than that. So thank you very much to you guys. Louise, you're the only one from council here, but you've probably worked the hardest, or your team. So thank you very much.
No,
it was me.
It was Louise.
Because I was just reflecting, 6 years is a lot. Yeah, we did that, and there's still heaps of work to do. So I'll leave that in capable hands. So thank you very much from my perspective.
Thank you, Chair. Attended a meeting of the council. I don't think there was much of great import. Under Three Waters and Waste, there was a report on the weather event that affected Omakau wastewater, which has required some remediation, but was not nearly as severe as at first thought. I've attended 1, 2 working party meetings for the hall. Anna, I'm losing track.
Yeah, we've had a couple. So we've done a Zoom one and a face-to-face.
Yep. And you can see the ongoing results from the agenda items there. And that's progressing. It's obviously the costs are the big question mark. Attended the business breakfast, and the Mayor is right. It's interesting to see the people, and also people coming from outside the district to attend, which is quite noticeable. Apart from that, I'd just like to thank my fellow members for an enjoyable 3 years, and most especially to thank our chair, who has done a fantastic job. Thank you.
So we attended the council workshop, which was to discuss the tranche one money, for the better off funding. So that was quite interesting. I went with Cromwell Community House. They were running winter driving sort of courses for their volunteers. So we had a get together at Highlands where we all went go-karting as well. So that was a bit of fun. I'm absolutely useless. I got lapped 3 times. That's because I'm such a safe driver. So went to the Cromwell Community House meeting, and that was on the 15th. I was an apology for the historical precinct meeting because that was my stepdaughter's 16th birthday. The council, what else up in the council? There was a report from Sport Otago. There was the decision was made public about the plan change 14, the results of that. Stephen Jeffries is standing down from the council, but he has been made an independent commissioner that has been called on for the hearings panel. There was a dog control policy, a report on that. That seems to be okay. Generally, owners seem to be quite well behaved. We covered that. And there's going to be, there was a report to get council to approve a policy that would require council to consider the use of different types of housing and developments on council owned land. So that is also, and that was about me. But and then of course it was Daffodil Day, which I was pretty pleased with. It ran very smoothly because last year it was cancelled. So I haven't got the full figures yet as to how much we raised, but I'm pretty positive that it was good. So yeah, everybody donated and were very generous. And I also would like to thank everybody. This is my first term and I've thoroughly enjoyed the company of everybody. It's been very interesting. I've learned a lot. Alas, and yeah, thank you very much.
Just to follow on then from some of the council meeting stuff, the plan change 14, which is the Liza Farm, Shannon Farm plan change, which was turned down by the commissioners originally, but through mediation approved by the Environment Court. What it does mean is that after, I can't remember exactly when for this, but from the entranceway at 144 Rippenvale Road to State Highway 6, they've got to form a 2 metre wide cycle and pedestrian walkway. And then when the 51st title is released at 224C, then they're required to construct an underpass under State Highway 6. The exact location of the underpass isn't defined, and where it goes and what it connects to has not been done either, but that's part of the rules in the structure plan. As Cheryl said, the hearings panel commissioners to take us through from when the election result is out and when the council is sworn in and the hearings panel appointed. So myself, Martin McPherson, Ian Kearney and Stephen Jeffrey were appointed as commissioners post-election. Stephen stays on for 3 years, I think it is, and Ian and I and Martin until either this year or the new hearings panel is formed, whichever comes first. The big fruit land that's going to NZTA is now fenced off, or for the walkway that's been approved by council, which we recommended. Cheryl talked about the housing policy. The Three Waters better off funding, the tranche 1 funding projects and priorities were agreed to. $3.1 million worth of central government funding coming in to support projects. I didn't write down which ones they are. We had our governance report where the important thing there was we reviewed the water services entity bill submission and ratified what was submitted to the select committee. Mayor Tim didn't mention, but he actually gave that submission to the select committee Monday fortnight ago. Yeah, Monday fortnight ago, probably. Yeah, and that's about it. Yeah, it's been a very interesting term and a lot of learning for me because I wasn't the chair which was bloody great. Is all I can say. And I want to acknowledge your leadership. Fantastic, you did a fantastic job, and learned a lot from watching you operate. To Buck and to Werner, yeah, I think you're cheating. Yeah, I just think you should have been back again for another crack. But anyway, that's your choice, and I think your contribution certainly hasn't gone unnoticed and has been really good. So thank you for that. Cheryl, first time up. Bob, come in later on the piece. It's not easy, and you know, you've all sort of taken to it pretty well the way I see it. And Nigel, yeah, more of the same. And who knows after the 8th of October what's going to happen next. But for those that are standing, good luck. And at least I know that we've got a couple back carry on. So Bob and Anna. That's about all from me. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, pretty quick. I've just taken a lot of abuse for the last month for not standing, but I would like to.
We can continue that.
But I'd just like to say thank you. I would love to carry on, but I'm just not a computer person, and I'm a practical person, and I struggle with the way things work. So, but I'd like to say thank you very much. It's been a big learning curve, and good luck to the two that carry on.
Yeah, I guess I've had a quiet month as well. Took a week's holiday, which was nice. Get away for a little while, get some sunshine. On the 3rd of September, I went to the performance of Murder by Committee with the Fine Times Theatre Company, a play that was written by Marion Lowe, a local lady who's also serves on the Cromwell and Districts Promotion Group. And of course, I'm the liaison with that group, and that's something that I've really enjoyed. Great fun with those ladies. Ladies, note. It was a great performance, sold out every night for 8 nights, and it was great to go and see that. I also attended the Cromwell Business Group Business Breakfast on the 7th of September. I've also fielded a number of calls following the release of the concept plans for the replacement for the Memorial Hall. And most people seem to be concerned about parking and the stability of the site. But I think those concerns have probably been addressed today. So I don't think we have anything to worry about there. I've actually been on this board for 14 months, and it amazes me how time flies when you're enjoying yourself. I have enjoyed myself. I have enjoyed myself, and I have enjoyed, doing my bit, if you like, to serve the community, and I've enjoyed the company of all the members here. So yeah, I'm grateful for that because I've learned a lot. I'm going to continue learning for the next 3 years, which is nice too. So yes, thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you all again, all of you again, those that are coming back in October. Thank you.
Move room second for members' reports, please. Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Werner.
I'm sure it was Werner and Buck, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Sorry, can't help myself.
Let us move something.
It's hard to catch your eye when you're snoozing, though.
Well, I can't work out as if you've got plenty to say, but when it comes to that, he's not putting his head up, isn't he?
Oh, I'll tell you what, it's those online ones where I couldn't even see you all, and you're all silent. Just come on. Right, thank you. Status reports. Anything in there?
Yep.
Yep.
I'm multitasking, better go back to it. Page 190, 22.4.2, that can be marked as completed. Shows the working tree names laying on the table, and then later on it's when they come back to the table. So it's just missed off. So I haven't heard of the working tree yet with their names. How did they go? How did it go?
Don't know. I've just got a text from Steve though. That said that he and Dwan would like to say hello. I'm free next Wednesday or Thursday.
Lucky you.
So I don't know what that means about how they went with the names. How did they go with the names?
I think they're relatively happy. I think they're relatively relieved.
It was done.
I think if I can say that, I think there's a lot of things they're not relatively happy about, which will be why they want to come and talk to me.
You mean it's not street names?
No. Or around things that are costing them money.
Oh, good.
God, there's shame, right?
So I think, totally paraphrasing here, I think they feel like they've been a bit done to around having to purchase land and those sorts of things, and they think that we're kind of doing it to them because they went down the fast track. There's been those sort of comments. So there's been recently comments to say that they're not happy with the consent conditions, which of course we have no control over, and that they want to deliver things to a lower standard, like instead of asphalt paths, gravel and not with them. So I don't know the detail, but that's a general sense
Right,
of,
thank you.
yeah.
But we haven't actually had any, so that's part of the fast
No,
track
and
process,
yeah.
the conditions, that process, that part, that's the condition.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people on the public say though, in their first consent, there's meant to be 4 rows of grapes right there in the whole. And a lot of people ask me about it, but I don't know about it, but is that right?
I can't remember, there's grapes around the edge.
The original plan change 12 that we did.
Yep.
Quite a lot of buffer zone around. So, and what they did when they changed their tack to what was approved in the plan change, it went down first of all a resource consent process, but then they stopped with the council, then went fast track.
Yep.
They changed their plans, and that's their prerogative. They're allowed to, and they actually effectively got through a resource consent process under the fast track laws, got different than what the plan, the rules for the resource area they're in actually allowed. And that's the process, and it is what it is.
And it comes out closer to the highway, and I think it's got less buffer.
Yeah.
There was a whole lot of things we submitted on, and some it's.
Yeah, because all the people are actually backed onto it from houses. A lot of people from the houses said it wasn't going to be too bad with the vineyards and all that there, but they're not going to be there now apparently.
No, they are, and that's outside.
Yeah.
There is still some vineyard there.
Yeah, no, they've removed them, but they're replanting. No, they've had to,
It's nothing like what the original plan change
it was
required.
supposed to be 4 rows, and it was supposed to be 3 hectares of working vineyard. But now I think it's reduced to about 1 hectare.
Yeah, the green space has certainly got reduced in their new
But I think
process.
it's us sort of taking it when it really
Yeah,
should
it's
be.
not us.
The public
Those
should know that.
ones are going back. I'm not quite sure why they were moved, but they were moved, and they've now been replanted back along there.
But I think you can quite rightly say to members of the public who question that subdivision to say, well, they went down a different process, it wasn't a council process, so it's actually been outside of our control.
Yeah.
I'm fed up with telling that story.
I know.
But it's a shame.
Yeah.
Because I think they're not very satisfied. We don't think it's the optimum outcome.
And they made a call about the process they took, and they thought it was the right way to go. But I think they've been let down by the process they went into.
To do things to a lower standard.
Yep.
You're not going to be happy with what you choose to do. And that's hard, yeah. All right, so yeah.
And the other thing back in the status reports was the, good to see the Cromwell Pool annual report, and shows that despite the fact that we had a pretty poor year from attendance wise because of COVID,
Yeah.
the financial result in that, not good, but actually it's good to have the reporting to know what's happening, you know.
Interestingly, did I see that there was something like about an 82 or a 92% reduction in school kids attendance?
No, because the pool was closed, we couldn't do lessons when the pool was closed.
So, but it said there was something like, was it something like 92%?
Well, we try and book lessons and we are constantly told that we can't fit in because they've got lots of big schools coming and you go, there's 3 medium-sized schools in Cromwell actually, not any big schools. So we do have difficulties booking at schools. Yeah.
Wow, I just was shocked that it was such a reduction.
About it in
Have you put one down the hall?
It's a struggle with staff and they can't get.
You have the paddling court.
Problem with pool space, but I mean, my junior school, it's 6 classrooms, which I can't fit you in for your 10 lessons. You go, we've got other schools, well, there are only 3 schools. Surely you can fit us
It's
in.
interesting, I do see the kids all walking along their little bikes, they're going to the pool. So I just, that figure just didn't seem to.
But they won't have had the school camps at the beginning of the year. So the first term, when they usually have school camps here at Bannockburn, they weren't here. So that might be it. It would be the other schools that come not for lessons, but for recreation on their school campus.
But Neil's point is correct. It's good to see,
Reports there.
good to see reporting that's to the point.
Because for all those years with the pool, just was the pool and it cost what it cost and we didn't really, but now we're actually actively managing it and looking for things in it that we need for constant improvement.
Right, shall we go to the recommendation that the report be received?
I'll move.
I'll second it.
Aye.
Computer shut down. So
No, it's not. So the resolution to exclude the public, the recommendation, the public be excluded, who aren't you, from the following parts of this meeting.
we're going to work, Mr. George.
Can I have a mover and a seconder for moving into public next to that was a Verna and a Cheryl. Thank you. All in favour?
Yeah, mine's not. I didn't think it's.
I think we've run out of power.
And sorry, and the date of